At 74 years old, Margaret Lewis sat alone on a cold wooden bench, holding a small bag that contained everything she had left in this world. No house, no savings, no family beside her, but what broke her wasn't the loss of money. It was the memory of everything she gave to the very people who walked away without looking back. 3 children, 3 lives she built from nothing, and not one of them came back for her, not even when she lost everything. But what they didn't know was that Margaret was about to do something that would change all of their lives forever, and her comeback would make them question everything they thought they knew about success, about love, and about consequences. Welcome to Dreams Never Grow Old, where stories aren't just told, they are felt. If this story touches you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share because sometimes the lessons we ignore are the ones we need the most. Now, let's begin. Margaret Lewis wasn't always alone. There was a time when her home was filled with laughter, with noise, with life. She had 3 children, Daniel, Sophie, and Marcus. They were her world, her reason to wake up every morning, her reason to keep going even when life gave her every reason to stop. Because life didn't treat Margaret kindly, at 34 she lost her husband. A sudden illness, no warning, no goodbye, just like that she became a widow with 3 young children and no plan. People told her to remarry. Find someone to help you, they said, but Margaret refused. I don't need another husband, she said quietly. I need to raise my children, and she meant it. Worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, morning shifts, night shifts, cleaning offices, serving tables, doing whatever it took to keep food on the table. There were nights she pretended she wasn't hungry just so her children could eat. Nights she stayed awake worrying about bills while her children slept peacefully. And every night she whispered the same prayer, let them have a better life than me. Slowly, her sacrifices began to show. Daniel became successful in business. Sophie built a career in law. Marcus started his own company. People admired Margaret. They called her strong, inspiring, a perfect mother. But what they didn't see was what she was quietly losing herself. At first, her children stayed close. They visited, they called, they checked on her, but as their lives grew, their time for her shrank. Calls became shorter, visits became rare, excuses became normal. I'm busy, Mom. I'll come next week. Work is stressful right now, and Margaret always understood, or at least she pretended to. One evening, Margaret prepared dinner. Her children were supposed to visit. She cooked their favorite meals, set the table, and waited and waited. Hours passed. The food went cold. Her phone stayed silent, until finally a message came, sorry mom, something came up. Looked at the table, 3 empty chairs, and for the first time she felt it, not loneliness but replacement. She was no longer their priority, she was an option. Then came the day everything changed. Her house, the one she worked her entire life to own, was suddenly a topic of discussion. Not love, not memories, but value. We should sell it, Daniel said. It's too big for you anyway. Margaret froze. Sell it? This house wasn't just a building, it was her life, her sacrifices, her memories, but to them it was just property. That night, Margaret sat alone in her living room, looking at the walls that had witnessed her entire life. And for the first time, she asked herself a question she never thought she would. Was it all worth it? Because what she was about to discover next would either break her completely or rebuild her into someone no one expected. Margaret gave her life so her children could have one, but now the very home she built with sacrifice was being turned into a decision, a transaction, and she had no idea that the people she trusted the most were already planning something that would leave her with nothing. It started as a discussion, at least that's what they called it. Daniel sat across from her, confident, calm, calculated. Mom, we've been thinking. Margaret already felt uneasy. Whenever someone says we've been thinking, it usually means the decision has already been made. Sophie leaned forward, gentle voice, careful tone. We just want what's best for you, Marcus nodded. This house is too much for you now, too big, too expensive, too stressful. Margaret looked around slowly at the walls, the photos, the memories. This is my home, she said quietly. Daniel smiled, not warmly but patiently. We know, Mom, but imagine something easier, a smaller place, less stress, and the money from the sale, Sophie added, we can manage it for you. That sentence hung in the air, uncomfortable, unsettling. Manage it? Since when did her children need to manage her life? But Margaret didn't argue because deep down she still trusted them. They were her children, her own blood, and that trust would cost her everything. A week later they returned, this time with papers. Just formalities, Daniel said, nothing complicated. Margaret adjusted her glasses and looked down, legal terms, fine print, words she didn't fully understand. Shouldn't I have a lawyer look at this? She asked. A brief silence followed, too brief. Sophie smiled quickly. Mom, it's just family, you don't need a lawyer. That sentence sealed her fate, because the moment trust replaces caution is the moment people become vulnerable. Margaret hesitated just for a second, then she signed. At first, nothing changed. The house was listed, buyers came and went, and eventually it sold. Margaret packed her things, each item a memory, each box a piece of her life. "Don't worry, Mom," Marcus said. "We've got everything handled." She believed him because she needed to. Until the day she asked, "When will I move into the new place?" Silence. Daniel avoided her eyes. "About that." Something in his tone shifted the air. "We think it's better if you stay somewhere temporary." "Temporary," she repeated, "just until we sort things out." But deep down she felt it, something wasn't right. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into silence. Her calls went unanswered, her messages ignored, and then the truth finally hit her. There was no new house, no plan, no safety net, the money was gone. Margaret sat on a bench holding a small bag, everything she had left, her house gone, her savings gone, her children gone. For the first time in her life she had nothing, not even answers. She replayed everything in her mind, every conversation, every moment, looking for the point where it all went wrong. But the truth was simple, painfully simple. She gave everything to people who only knew how to take. That night she cried, not softly, not quietly, but deeply. The kind of cry that comes from betrayal, not loss, because losing things can be replaced, but losing trust changes you forever. The next morning, something shifted. Margaret wiped her tears and looked at herself in a reflection, and for the first time she didn't see a victim. She saw a woman who survived everything: loss, struggle, pain, and now betrayal. "If I built their lives," she whispered, "I can rebuild mine." In that moment, Margaret made a decision. She would not beg, she would not chase, she would not break, she would rise. And when she did, they would feel it, not through revenge but through something far more powerful: success. Because the woman they thought was finished was just getting started, and what she was about to do next would make them regret every decision they made. Not because she punished them, but because she proved she never needed them. They thought she was finished. A 74-year-old woman with no home, no savings, no family beside her. But what they failed to understand was this: they didn't just take her house, they didn't just take her money, they awakened something in her that had been buried for decades: strength, resilience, and a quiet determination that would change everything. The first few days were the hardest. Margaret had nowhere to go, no plan, no certainty, but she had something most people underestimate: experience, a lifetime of it. She found a small shelter, simple, quiet, temporary. The bed was hard, the room was shared, the nights were long. But for the first time in years, Margaret wasn't living for anyone else, and that changed something inside her. She started small, helping in the shelter, kitchen, cleaning, organizing. People noticed her not because she asked for attention but because of how she carried herself. Calm, dignified, strong. One day a volunteer approached her. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Margaret smiled faintly. "I've done everything before." That conversation changed everything. The volunteer introduced her to a small community program. They needed someone to help manage daily operations. Nothing big, nothing glamorous, but it was something. Margaret accepted without hesitation because she understood something most people don't: big changes start with small decisions. Weeks passed, then months. Margaret didn't just work, she transformed the place. Systems improved, people felt supported, the environment changed, and soon others began to notice. Donors, organizers, leaders. The same woman who had nothing was now becoming someone people depended on. Opportunities grew, responsibilities increased. Margaret was offered a leadership role, a paid position. For the first time in months she had income again, not from her children, not from inheritance, but from her own effort, her own value, and something inside her healed. Moved into a small apartment, simple, clean, hers, no memories of betrayal, no reminders of loss, just a fresh start. And for the first time in a long time, Margaret smiled. Success has a strange effect. It attracts attention, and eventually it reached the people who had left her behind, her children. Daniel saw her name in an article, Sophie heard about her work, Marcus saw her photo online, and suddenly they remembered her. One afternoon there was a knock at her door. Margaret opened it and there they were, her children, standing together. Older, quieter, different, but not different enough. "Mom," Daniel began, his voice softer than she remembered. "We've been trying to reach you." Margaret looked at him, calm, unshaken. "I know," she said. Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. Sophie stepped forward. "We made mistakes," Marcus added quietly. "We didn't realize." Margaret raised her hand gently, stopping them. I lost everything, she said. Her voice wasn't angry, it was worse, it was honest. And none of you came back. They lowered their heads because there was no excuse, no explanation, no justification, just truth, and sometimes truth is the hardest thing to face. Can we fix this? Sophie asked, tears in her eyes. Margaret looked at them for a long moment, then she said something they would never forget. You can't go back and fix the past, but you can choose who you become next. She stepped back slightly. I've already chosen. In that moment, they realized something. She didn't need them anymore, not for survival, not for happiness, and that was their greatest loss. Sometimes, the people we give everything to teach us the hardest lessons, not about love but about value, because when you give without limits you risk losing yourself. But when you rebuild, when you rise, when you choose yourself again, you don't just recover, you transform. And sometimes the greatest comeback is not proving others wrong, it's realizing you were always enough. If this story touched you, subscribe to Dreams Never Grow Old because every life has a lesson worth hearing.